Hello and welcome to Let's Talk, brought to you by Elevator, Scotland's leading business support and entrepreneurial assistance organisation, and supported by Royal Bank of Scotland. So it's a pleasure to join you again. And I'm delighted that for this session we are joined once again by Dr. Mairi Macleod, our in-house evolutionary biologist. And today we're going to be looking at, again, some of those issues and challenges that we have embedded in us through evolution, but we'll also be looking at how you can overcome those to help grow and develop your business idea. So Mairi, it's a pleasure to see you again. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm enjoying the sunny, snowy weather here in Edinburgh. It's great to see you again, Kat.
It's a bit chilly, but it's nice and cosy here. So, Mairi, today we're looking at the subject. Well, the title of our topic, our title of our session today, rather, is Queen Bees and Shrinking Violets. So, we're going to be looking at the subject of competition and collaboration. So, tell us, how do men and women compete differently?
Yeah, well, it is quite different. So if you think about men, first of all, they tend to be quite obvious and overt in their competition, whether that's, arguing verbally or actually, standing up and fighting one another physically. And this is because, men benefit through competing for status. If they have high status, they get the girls, they get more sex, and that, has passed down genetically through the generations. And so they have a benefit from this overt competition, but men tend to also be very good at reconciling. If they've had a fight, they often make up, and that's because men in a given community have to band together to form coalitions to sort of compete with men in other communities. So that could be in the sense of a war, or it could be in sport or with other companies in business. But the competition in women is very different. It's a very different story for women. They don't benefit in the same way from acquiring high status. And for women over evolutionary time, it's been about survival and survival of their children. So we don't want to be doing risky things like, getting into physical fights with others, not usually anyway. So our form of competition tends to be a bit more covert, sort of under the radar. Often we don't even know we're competing ourselves, but we are. I wouldn't say that, this sex difference is set in stone. There's a huge amount of variation within each gender, and there's lots of overlap. It's just like, if you think of height, for example, we all know that men tend to be taller than women, but that doesn't mean that all men are taller than all women. There's lots of variation, and it's the same with behavioural traits too. But in general, women tend to compete far more sort of covertly than men do. So difference.
But women do support each other on many occasions. I mean, collaboration's a big thing, and they form groups to do that. Then that's but slightly different groups then in the way that men would.
Yeah. Well, women do support each other hugely. They form incredibly close friendships. In fact, closer than men do, generally speaking. But these tend to be sort of one-on-one friendships, or with a very small number of other women. Women do form groups for certain things, but they tend not to be coalitions in the same way that men form coalitions. So, for example, I remember when I had babies, get together with other mums and we'd sort of all do things together. But it wasn't really a coalition. You tend to have like one or two close relationships within that group. It's not the same as, a sort of full-blown coalition. There is an exception, though, to women's lack of coalitionary behaviour, and that is women in families. So sisters, aunties, mums and daughters, and that. They do form true coalitions. They have a kind of genetic stake in each other's welfare, but also they know each other well. They've known each other for a long time. They trust each other. Women in families obviously do fall out sometimes, but they tend to reconcile usually. So that's the exception.
And I guess it comes back again to what we talked about in the first session, where you talked about the smaller mastermind groups as well that women form to support each other.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a very valuable thing to do, and the fact that it's a small group is the crux of it. You know, women do really well by forming small numbers of, you know, very sort of small, strong networks compared with the sort of bigger coalitions that the men form. So that's definitely the way to go.
So you talked about the covert nature of competition amongst women as opposed to, you know, the more overt way that men do it. How does this affect us in our work?
Yeah, it does have a big impact on our work. I think because of the covert way that women compete, we have evolved to be really sensitive to other people's thoughts and feelings in terms of, you know, are they going to socially exclude us? Are they on our side or not? So we're very kind of tuned into that, much more than men are. So women tend to be better at mentalizing, better at understanding other people's emotions and points of view and thoughts. So higher in empathy, basically, which is a great thing to have. You know, it's really useful in lots of ways. You know, it'll help you, you know, understand your customers and your colleagues better. It'll help you read the room, you know, understand what's going on. But on the downside, it makes us a lot more sensitive to other people's kind of emotions, and it makes us more sensitive to criticism, particularly from other women. I'm actually reminded of a story I heard about Tracy Edwards. She was the female skipper of an all-female crew on a round the world yacht race, and she apparently was saying that sometimes when she's, you know, skippering with female crew members, it's quite difficult sometimes, you know, when the shit's really hitting the fan and she has to yell at someone to move her ass and haul in the sheet or whatever. Sometimes she gets women bursting into tears and running, you know, down below, and, you know, in a huff. Whereas if she's working with male crew, which she does sometimes, you know, it's just like, well, oh, Tracy's off on one again, and they just get on with it. So women can sort of hold themselves back a bit sometimes because of this sensitivity, and so I think it's worth being aware of this tendency. You know, if you're employing a woman, and you know, you've got to be aware that she's going to be really sensitive to any way that you're talking about her work in a slightly negative fashion, perhaps, and also, you know, looking at it the other way around. If you know, you might want to sort of try not to be too sensitive about how someone's talking about your work, because that's not necessarily helpful in a work context, at least. So yeah.
And I guess this competition or this effect can impact women's confidence as well. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. It could definitely have an impact on confidence, and also it has an impact on women's propensity to sort of talk about their talents and their achievements. You know, one of the covert ways that women compete is to try and keep everyone on a level. You know, so we want everyone in our peer group to be at the same level as us, and you know, if someone gets airs and graces and gets above herself and gets above everyone else, it's like, oh, who does she think she is? And so basically there's a danger that we could be rejected from the group if we kind of, you know, are seen to be above everyone else. And so we try to kind of minimize our achievements sometimes. You know, imagine, you know, you're with your peers and you've just passed an exam with flying colours. You've done really, really well. Are you going to go, I'm absolutely awesome, you know, I'm just the best at this? No, you're not going to say that. You're going to go, oh, you know, the questions were just on my side this time. I was really lucky. It was a fluke. Or if you're playing tennis with your friend and you win a shot, you're not going to kind of go on and on about how great you are. You're going to say, oh, sorry, you know, I'm not really good at tennis or anything, you know, that was just a fluke. So we tend to sort of play down our achievements as women a lot of the time, especially with other women. And obviously men, on the other hand, they shout about their achievements from the rooftops for all to hear. They're not at all backwards and coming forwards about what they're doing. Men have evolved big egos for a reason. You know, as I said, they are kind of looking to gain high status because that benefits them. And what better way to sort of convince your opponents of that you're bigger or stronger or smarter than them than to believe it yourself. So there's a good reason for men to have big egos, but it makes them come across as perhaps more confident than they should. You know, it doesn't necessarily correlate with actual ability. So again, you know, it's worth really being aware of these differences when sort of looking at, you know, perhaps if you were going to employ somebody, you might want to take into account what gender they are and whether their, you know, confidence actually, you know, goes with what their actual ability is. So, yeah.
And so for many of the women that are watching today who've got their own businesses, who feel that who are self-deprecating, not to fear, this is part of an evolutionary trait, but we can overcome it.
Yeah. I mean, we can, but we also have to be aware of how other people are viewing us as well. I mean, it's there for a reason. And if women do kind of shout about how wonderful they are, in certain contexts, it might not be the right thing to do in terms of how you're going to get on with the people there. But I think greater awareness, you know, from as many people as possible is going to be beneficial in that case.
So that's looking at the kind of shrinking violet side of it. Let's look at the queen bee aspect of the subject, which is fascinating as well. What about queen bees?
Yeah. Well, queen bees are the women at the top that aren't, you know, have sort of pulled up the ladder. They're not supporting other women to come up to their level. The sort of archetypal queen bee is probably Margaret Thatcher. For those that are old enough to remember, I'm certainly old enough to remember. You know, she, in all her time as prime minister, she only had one female cabinet minister, as far as I know. But basically, this often happens because women don't cooperate well across ranks. So if a woman has high rank, there isn't a huge amount of benefit for her in collaborating with juniors, not obvious benefit anyway, in a lot of cases. So research has shown that men, they're happy to collaborate with junior men and women because it benefits them to have more people in their coalition, if you like. But women who are senior women, they don't tend to collaborate with junior women. Of course, there are some women that are really supportive. You know, some female leaders, you know, make it their business to, you know, support other women and bring other women up. And I think the reason why some women are queen bees is because they have a perception of threat. You know, they feel that their position is threatened. You know, and that might be because, you know, there's not that many perceived spaces for women at the top, and so, you know, they don't want to be sort of knocked off their perch by some, you know, new talented youngster coming up. So I think what we need to do in order to get more of the female leaders that are supportive of women is to increase the perceived space for women at the top, if you like. And in the context of entrepreneurs, you know, we need to increase opportunities for women, and we need to increase the perception of that. So that means having, you know, more successful businesses run by women, supporting women. But obviously, that's a kind of chicken and egg situation, isn't it? You know, how do we actually get to that point? And I think, you know, one thing would be to support women in getting funding. You know, to actually flag up the fact that, you know, women need funding to get to this stage, and, you know, we need more women up there. So I think that's certainly an area to work on, to actually decrease the perceived threat and increase the perception of opportunity up there.
And we know from an economic perspective that the Rose report that was pulled together by Alison Rose shows that we need more active females in the business and entrepreneurial community running successful businesses and supporting each other. So there's an economic argument to make for it as well, which is really powerful. And this programme is there to do that and encourage those women. So we've talked, you know, a lot about the competition side of things, Mairi. What do you think we can be doing to collaborate more and to encourage that kind of support rather than being in competition with each other, whether we're entrepreneurs or in the business world?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you can't get rid of all competition. There's always going to be competition, and that's a good thing. You know, everyone needs to compete on the basis of merit. I think what we want to get rid of is the competition that's destructive, that's bringing women down just because they're women. And I think, sort of general awareness of the situation, as I've been talking about, is a good thing. But I think we also need to harness our evolved tendencies. So if you remember earlier on, I was talking about the fact that women in families, they do form true coalitions. They support each other. They're always going to be there for each other. Even if they fall out, they'll reconcile. So what we want to do with groups of women working together is we want to get them to a stage where they're a bit like families. And that means, getting to trust each other, getting to know each other's backstories and things. So, we talked in the last vodcast about getting women together in small groups. Small groups really work well for women just because of, what I've already been talking about in terms of the relationships, that women have. They have very strong relationships with just a few other women. And so small groups work really well. But the other thing is to build up trust in that group. And to do that, I think it's about learning about each other's backstories, learning about the personal stuff. Because if you do that, then, you get to a stage where you can, really trust each other, really know that you've got each other's back. And as well as building up trust, it helps to level the playing field. If you remember, I was saying that, we want to keep everyone on a level. That's the way we cooperate best. If people get ahead of us, then that's not good. And we don't necessarily cooperate down the hierarchy either. So if we can get everyone on a level, that's a good thing. So if you imagine, having a mastermind group, for instance, you might have a couple of the women are really experienced business women. They've got lots to bring to the party in terms of, tips about business. But other women might be experienced in other realms, maybe personal stuff like, having kids or going through menopause or, whatever it is. They've got more experience. And so everyone can bring value to the table. And when you have that situation, that's when women are going to be able to collaborate best, because everyone knows that everyone else has got value. They can trust each other. It's a small group with strong relationships, and I think that's really, really going to help women move forwards. So whether that's a mastermind group to help each other with business problems, or actual collaborations where women are doing business together, I think that's going to be the way to go to help women.
Absolutely. And that's fascinating, because obviously when you're running your own business, you can't be all things to all people. So I guess where you can add value to each other's businesses and pull in associates or people to collaborate with, then you strengthen the offer to your customer base as well. But it's really interesting to hear about the fact that trust is so important, and understanding people's backstories is something that is part of our evolutionary makeup as women, that it enables us to move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure everyone can think of examples where they might have, not really liked another woman. There was something a bit odd about her, or, she just didn't fit in. And then later on, they've learned, something about the background of the woman concerned, and actually realise, oh, there was a reason for that, and things are fine from then on, sort of thing. So I think that is the way to go. You can obviously only do that with a small number of people, but if you do have that small alliance of women that can have your back, that's really going to strengthen you and make you feel a lot more confident about taking chances and taking risks in your business that you need to take to actually move forwards as well. So I think that's
so more mastermind groups is what we need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Mairi, as ever, I think I could chat to you for the rest of the day about these topics, which are absolutely fascinating, and the reason why we are hardwired to behave the way that we do. But sadly, we've run out of time. But you'll be joining us again in April, when you're going to be telling us how monkeys taught you to take risks.
Yeah, I always like to get a few monkeys in.
We love that. That's wonderful. I think we can't wait to hear from that. Well, Mairi, thank you once again for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to see you, and we'll see you again in April.
Great. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks, Mairi. So yes, again, another absolutely fascinating chat with Dr. Mairi Macleod, evolutionary biologist, what we can learn from nature and the steps that we can take to move forward. So if you've enjoyed today's session, then please come and join us on our Facebook group. Let's talk about what's stopping you. You can find more information about the Let's Talk initiative on the Elevator website. We have a number of events coming up, including Growth Mindset Workshop, Personal Branding Workshop, and on top of that, we have our monthly drop-in coffee and chat sessions, or the beverage of your choice. Maybe in these days it's hot bovril. Thank you so much for your time, and until the next time, be brave.